The chamber reeked of ozone and diplomacy. John Harker stepped off the maglev transit ring into the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Concord, boots clicking against a floor polished, smooth by centuries of high-level squabbling. His breath caught, not because of awe, though the sight was something massive petal-like structures overhead unfurled in a slow mechanical bloom, catching starlight through transparent alloy panels. But it wasn't beauty that froze him. It was the crowd. Hundreds of delegates from across 26 planetary systems floated, slithered, or stalked toward their seats. Holographic placards hovered above tiered platforms, some in symbols he couldn't decipher, others auto-translated into crisp Terran English. Krill Dominion, Thentari Commonwealth, John Void State. No Terran Republic, just him, alone. Photosynthetic fluids glistened on the translucent skin of a Plurni ambassador as she secreted moisture from her gill slits. To her right, a gnarled Avakine noble reclined mid-air in an antigrav hammock, adjusting gravity like it was a fashion accessory. Nearby, a six-legged Shaltic diplomat tapped its thoracic node against a translator orb, chirping with frustration as the device sputtered between languages. John reached up and subtly tapped behind his ear. The implant buzzed once, indicating full sync. Great, at least that wouldn't go wrong today. His stomach churned. It wasn't nausea he'd survived turbulence in an unshielded atmospheric skiff over Mars. This was mild by comparison. But the sensation of standing in a room where everything was smarter, older, and weirder than him scraped at his nerves. Everyone else here had evolved from predator stock, or survived gas giants, or endured civilizational collapses before Earth had even left its moon. He adjusted his collar and approached the designated speaker's column. Protocol dictated he stand until invited. So he did. For 17 minutes. Then a chime. From the central dais, a Shirathi archivist rose. Tall, glistening with a fluid-based bioluminescence, she pulsed with a faint blue glow indicating curiosity. Her voice, through the translator, came as a melodic trill. "Representative Harker, you are the designated envoy of Terra?" "Yes," he said, clearing his throat. "John Harker, civilian liaison to the Terran Interstellar Embassy. You have been summoned to address an inquiry submitted by the Joint Sentient Biology Committee." The archivist turned to a circular ring of delegates. "Your world presents anomalous biodiversity rankings. The catalogers seek clarification." John blinked. Clarification on what exactly? There was a brief rustle of motion. Digital pads activated. Dozens of beings leaned forward. The archivist's eyes flared pale yellow. "Earth houses thousands of apex-level species. Your atmosphere supports unusually violent evolutionary adaptations. We ask you plainly, who is Earth's deadliest predator?" The room went still as something built to hold creatures from 13 different gravity types could manage. John hesitated. Images flickered behind alien eyes. Some clearly expected the obvious big cats, oceanic monsters, viruses. Already, a few were pulling up projections, preparing to log new entries into their galactic bestiaries. A tall Bryven scholar had a full three-dimensional rendering of a saltwater crocodile queued. John inhaled slowly. Then he smiled tight, tired, like a man recalling a story he didn't quite want to tell, and pointed at himself. A wave of discomfort rippled through the chamber. One of the Avakine barked out something in their native tongue, sharp and fast. The translator caught it a moment later. "Is this a joke?" Silence thickened. The Zirathi tilted her elongated head. "You refer to yourself?" "Yes," John said. "To humans." Laughter didn't follow, only a low murmur of confusion. Then came the demands. "What qualifies your species yourself for such classification?" asked a Thentari biostrategist, its head a mass of glistening cilia. Another delegate, voice tinged with suspicion, added, "No claws, no neurotoxic secretions. Your skeleton is fragile, your musculature underdeveloped. On what grounds do you claim apex status?" John's smile dropped. He tapped the console before him. A hologram flared to life, and the images began. Not of monsters, but of men. A photo of a climber dangling from a sheer cliff face with one arm, ice-blasted and bleeding, hundreds of feet above a jagged crevasse. Another of a medic suturing a wound on his own thigh in the back of a dust-covered ambulance during a sandstorm. Grainy footage of a tribal runner in Kenya pacing a wounded antelope for over 8 hours until the beast collapsed from exhaustion. Then came the battlefield clips. Not glorified reels, raw data. Body cameras from disaster zones, both natural and man-made. A woman dragging 3 children out of floodwaters with a shattered ankle. A firefighter holding a beam off a trapped man while her hands blistered from the heat. A downed pilot crawling through tundra for 2 days with a dislocated shoulder, his breath fogging with frost as he whispered coordinates into a broken radio. None of it was entertainment. John wasn't trying to impress them. He just told the truth. "I'm not saying this with pride," he said, voice low, "but our deadliest predator is ourselves. And it's not because we were born with teeth or toxins. It's because we can think, plan, cooperate, and if needed, we'll suffer through anything to survive." A Gorthan analyst leaned forward. "Why would your kind do this to itself?" John looked up. "Because the world doesn't care if we live or die, so we had to." A hush. Then, the faint hum of reclassification protocols activating. A warning tone beeped in the chamber's security grid. A drone drifted half a meter closer to John's platform. He didn't move. The avian diplomat from the Trinalis cluster turned to his aide. "And these creatures explore other worlds?" His feathers trembled. John could only nod. This wasn't the end. The real story, the truth of it, the cost of it, was only beginning. The chamber hadn't grown louder, just colder. Silence had an atmosphere here. It rolled, palpable and thick, across the assembly like an unscheduled weather system. Delegates exchanged furtive glances, their data slates flickering with overlays of muscle density, thermal thresholds, nerve conduction speeds, all of it pitiful by galactic standards. And yet they couldn't look away. John stepped down from the speaker's column without being dismissed, which, under normal council etiquette, could have triggered a formal reprimand. No one stopped him. The security drone tracked his motions silently but didn't engage. He stood now at floor level, not elevated, not separated, just there. A man in a worn diplomatic suit, sleeves slightly too long, a shimmer of artificial starch already fading. His implant blinked, once an incoming file. Council regulations. His change in threat classification was now official. The Zirathi archivist had not returned to her seat. She regarded him with open curiosity, her skin shifting through subtle hues of amber and green. "You have provided emotionally compelling evidence," she said. "But this council requires empirical verification. You claim your species is apex due not to strength, but strategy. Can you provide further substantiation?" John glanced around. No point in retreating now. "Yes," he said, "but it's not easy to explain with charts." "Then do not explain," she replied. "Demonstrate. A request. Or perhaps a challenge." He didn't sigh, though he wanted to. "Fine," he said, and adjusted the holographic feed to his own neural archive. "Let's talk about the mountain." The lights dimmed slightly as the feed engaged. No dramatic music, no narrative voiceover, just raw footage. A stormy ridge in Nepal, some 12,000 feet above base camp. Snow whipping in horizontal sheets. A human figure him bracing against the wind, a line tied from his harness to another climber ahead. The shot blurred with sleet, then static, then darkness. A new feed, grainy night vision, John's face, pale with hypoxia, blood smeared near his temple, breath shallow. A trembling hand brought a flare to life, signaling their position. The voiceover came from him, quiet and unsentimental. "We'd lost contact with support. One of our climbers had gone over the edge. I'd fractured my femur on a jagged rock maybe 2 hours earlier. Compound fracture. I tried to splint it with a climbing baton and duct tape. Not sterile, not effective." One of the delegates recoiled. A fleshy tendril curled back into its carapace. "Painkillers?" someone asked. "None," he answered. "We'd rationed supplies, gave the last dose to the guy with hypothermia. I figured I could hold out. He couldn't." The room did not interrupt again. The footage changed. A medevac arriving 16 hours later. John being lifted into a gurney, barely conscious. "Bone reduction surgery," he continued, now speaking in real time again. 6 hours. They inserted an intramedullary nail metal rod through the marrow canal to keep it aligned. He paused. The Sharathi, strangely, leaned in. "Recovery?" she asked. 8 weeks in a cast. Then rehab. I couldn't walk unassisted until the 4th month. Started training again by the 6th. I still have limited rotation in the joint. "Why would you continue after such injury?" He hesitated. "Because we left someone on that mountain. I went back the next year. We brought him home." The translator hesitated, searching for adequate phrasing, before settling on home, as in his physical remains? Yes. Another delegate, tentacled and bioluminescent, blinked in what might have been bafflement. "Why risk your life for a dead one?" John's voice was low. "Because he mattered. And not because of what he could still do, but because he once stood beside us." The silence this time didn't chill the air. It deepened it. A moment passed. Then the Avakeen noble spoke, her eyes narrowed. "This softness, is it weaponized?" He turned. "Number, but it changes outcomes." A new image flared grainy footage of emergency responders during a flood in what looked like Southeast Asia. A human clung to a cable line, stretched across a torrent, hauling up a child, then letting himself be swept downstream rather than overload the line with weight. The child was pulled up. The man disappeared under the current. He didn't resurface. "No weapon," John repeated. "Just choice. That's our apex trait. We choose." A series of low tones signaled a subcouncil's deliberation. Several species were conferring through private digital nodes, even as others watched the projection replay. The Briven biologist toggled data overlays of adrenaline spikes, metabolic capacity, cortical pain tolerance. One whispered, "It should not be viable. Yet, it persists." The Zarathi archivist tilted her head. "You said you were not proud of being apex, yet you do not shy from the consequences." John took a breath. "Pride's irrelevant. We evolved this way because the world kept trying to kill us. Drought, cold, disease, predators. Each time, we figured something out. Not because we're brave. Because we're scared. And we hate dying." He shrugged slightly. "And we're really bad at giving up." A soft chime interrupted the air, a formal petition from the Growl diplomatic triad. 3 skeletal beings with translucent bones requested clarification. One leaned forward, speaking through the shared neural translator. "Your endurance seems excessive for your physical design. Do you feel pain as others do?" He didn't answer immediately. He wanted to lie. He didn't. "Yes," he said. "A lot. And maybe they saw it." The slight wince as he shifted his stance, the micro-adjustment of someone who knew that stiffness meant later swelling. The limp he still carried from a tendon torn during a mission 3 years back. "We feel everything," John said quietly. "We just keep going anyway." A new delegate spoke, this one quieter, analytical, a thin, proboscis-faced researcher from the John Void state. "You keep referencing choice and survival, but your species wars with itself. How does that factor into apex behavior?" John looked up. "It doesn't make us better, but it proves we'll do anything to win, even when we're wrong." The drone moved another half-meter closer. John didn't flinch. The archivist's glow dimmed, a subtle cue of contemplation. She asked, "And this knowledge, what do you expect us to do with it?" "I don't expect anything," he replied. "But if we're going to share the galaxy, you should know who you're dealing with. Not monsters, not saints, just people who've spent thousands of years refusing to die." A slow murmur rippled across the assembly. Not fear, not approval, something older respect's cautious ancestor. John stepped back toward his platform. He didn't return to the speaker's podium. Instead, he stood at floor level again, eye level with delegates who had never known the taste of dirt, or the weight of ice in their lungs, or the creak of bones healing crooked after a bad fall. He didn't need to say more. Not yet. He could feel the shift in the air. Not hostile. Not quite. Just the beginning of something new. The galactic chamber had grown warmer, not in temperature, but in mood. A few species could be seen retracting defensive membranes, while others subtly recalibrated their bioscanners. That drone still hovered near John, but its emitter light had dimmed from orange to soft green, no longer threat assessing, just watching. It was the archivist who broke the silence again, this time stepping forward off the central dais, an uncommon gesture. "You continue to insist," she said slowly, "that your kind's lethality arises not from instinct, but intention." John nodded. "We don't kill because we're hungry, or territorial. Not usually. We kill because we think it'll solve something. A being shaped like a vertical ribbon of algae, its entire body afloat in a protective hydration field, drifted forward from the biocognitive review board. Then how do you live with yourselves?" That one stung, not for its bluntness, but because it was fair. John exhaled. "Some of us don't." A heavy pause. Then he turned and activated a different sequence of holograms. Not action clips this time. Photographs, rows of weathered headstones. A soldier hugging her son before deployment. A nurse falling asleep in a chair between ICU shifts. "There's a price," he said. "We pay it daily, in memory, in broken bodies, in choices we can't undo." The images shifted again, disaster zones, not caused by nature but by human negligence. Oil spills, smog-choked cities, collapsed buildings that once teemed with life. "We're dangerous," he said, "but not because we enjoy it, because we survive anything, even ourselves." That's when the whisper started. A young envoy from the Ortali delegation, small and stone-skinned, leaned into its senior diplomat and muttered, just loud enough to carry across the space, "And still, they think they belong out here." John didn't respond. Not right away. He let the murmur pass. Then he tapped his wrist, projecting one last clip. This one was personal. A desert-blinding sun, empty horizon. A wrecked rover half buried in a dune. The footage came from a helmet cam. His helmet, oxygen low, suit breached near the thigh. He had wrapped it with torn insulation from the rover's comm array. "I was 30 kilometers from base," he said, voice flat. "Leg torn up from shrapnel during a rollover. Ribs bruised. I could barely breathe. No signal. Water pack compromised." The aliens didn't gasp. Most of them didn't even blink, but many leaned forward. "I crawled 16 kilometers before I blacked out. Woke up 3 days later after a drone picked up the heat signature and my emergency beacon kicked in. I'd ruptured a ligament, torn the lower part of my quadriceps, and was borderline septic from the wound exposure." He let the medical data project out graph overlays of his vitals during the event, oxygen saturation dropping to 79%, core temperature falling below 35 Celsius, heart arrhythmia, moderate muscle necrosis near the wound site. Recovery took 4 months, 2 surgeries, 38 sessions of physical therapy before he could walk without a cane. No hyper-regenerative tissue, no symbiotic healing pods, just time, pain, and effort. The Ortali envoy stared. "You shouldn't have survived." "No," John agreed, "but I did." The Zarathi archivist watched him for a long time, her skin rippling with unspoken analysis. "You truly believe suffering is a strategy?" He shook his head. "Number. It's a consequence. Our strategy is adaptation." Several delegates stirred. A few had begun to see the implications. Earth's apex predator didn't just endure its own cruelty, it refined it, folded it into medicine, into tools, into culture. One professor from the Chari science conclave murmured into a sublink, "They've turned endurance into an engine." That was when another voice piped in. Not loud, not accusatory, just confused. A crystalline ambassador from the Pluenth spoke, "But your bodies are so soft." John glanced up. He didn't laugh. He didn't take it as an insult. Instead, he stepped back into the projection zone and let a final image fill the chamber. It was of a baby. Human, newborn, eyes barely open, wrapped in a blanket, held in a scarred, calloused hand. "This," he said softly, "is how we begin. Useless, breakable, needing everything." He looked up. "We start soft, so we learn fast. We build. We form bonds because we have to. Every breath we take is earned through years of someone else keeping us alive. And when we finally walk, we do it on legs built by failure. That's how we got to the stars." The Pluenth ambassador blinked in prisms. You weaponized vulnerability. No, John said. We survived it. Then came the one question no one wanted to ask, but everyone waited for. It came, unsurprisingly, from a security official. Tall, rigid, ocular implants twitching slightly. If your species is this, adaptable, this determined, what happens if you turn that against us? The room shifted again. The drone lit orange. John didn't raise his voice. He didn't gesture. We're not here to dominate. We've had enough of that back home. But we do defend ourselves. And if we're backed into a corner, yes, we bite. He tapped his temple, deactivating the projection. But that's not the point. The point is we came anyway, knowing how you'd see us, hoping we could show you we're more than our worst traits. A junior delegate, an avian with a shimmering blue crest, whispered, "And yet, you still smile." John turned toward her. "No," he said, "not always." There was no grand applause, no declaration of status, just quiet. And then finally, a question spoken softly, but without sarcasm, from the Zerathi. "What do you want from us?" John looked around. "To be part of the future," he said. "To learn, to share what we've figured out, to stop bleeding just long enough to build something better." A long silence. Then the archivist gave the smallest of bows, formal, measured. "You will remain for further cultural dialogue, under diplomatic observation." He nodded once. That was fair. The security drone backed off by a meter. And so he stood there, not as a threat, not as a curiosity, but as a participant, one of the soft ones, who made it anyway. They gave him a room with no corners. Apparently, that was a diplomatic gesture. Many species viewed corners as threatening, remnants of primitive hunting structures or architectural containment. The room had smooth curves, ambient light panels that simulated breathable warmth, and a console he was explicitly told not to touch without supervision from an integration liaison. John stared at it anyway for about 15 minutes. Then he took off his boots, badly worn, soles uneven from years of walking on terrain that rarely agreed with them, and sat on the low, scooped platform that passed for furniture. He exhaled, slowly. The kind of exhale that deflates more than lungs. The kind that lets fatigue back in. The council chamber had gone quiet after the Sarathi's decision. They'd recessed the summit early, citing the need for immediate and urgent subcommittee evaluation of Terran's social strategic parameters, which, in plain English, meant they needed a minute to process what they'd just seen. John didn't blame them. The knock at the curved doorway came softly. A mechanical chime followed it. "You can come in," he said, voice still hoarse. It was the Sarathi archivist, not in her diplomatic cloak, but something less formal, fluidly patterned robes of soft color and motion. Her glow was muted, more in thought than in power. "I was not assigned to this visit," she said. "I came because I wished to." John nodded. "All right." She took the seat across from him, legs folding in a pattern that vaguely resembled kneeling. "We have been reevaluating your classification," she said. "Apex is no longer sufficient." John raised an eyebrow. "You're going to downgrade us?" "No," she replied. "We're recalibrating. We lacked a category for sapient tenacity that operates without bioengineered enhancement." He smirked, just barely. "You'll need a longer term for that." The archivist tilted her head. "We've begun calling it resilient volition." He chuckled. "Sounds like something out of a psych journal." "It is," she replied. "We borrowed it." She hesitated then, her glow dimming to a gentle green. "There is one final request, not from the council, from me." John leaned forward. "Sure." She passed him a data slate. On it, a series of short video clips, interstellar news segments, open-source archives from Earth's communication webs, but not war footage, not survival logs. Moments. A teenager practicing violin in a subway, surrounded by strangers who stopped to listen. A man carrying his dog through floodwaters. A couple reuniting at an airport, the embrace long enough to miss 3 transit shuttles. "These," she said, "we do not understand." John's voice was quiet. "That's not surprising. Explain them." He looked at the final clip, an elderly woman giving her scarf to a crying child at a tram station. "That's why we keep going," he said. She blinked. "Not the pain," he continued. "Not the endurance or the tools or the grit. The reason we survive all that. Connection." "Exactly." The Sarathi sat back. "We misjudged your kind." Gravely. John gave a half-smile. "You're not the first. We thought apex status required physical supremacy, but your path went another way. You evolved emotionally faster than your form." "No," he said gently. "We didn't. We just pretend better. Some of us figured out how to care louder than we break." She nodded, slow and thoughtful. "Will others of your kind be like you? Some better, some worse. And you're not afraid of how they'll see us?" He looked up, eyes tired. "If they're anything like me, they'll see you the same way I do. Curious, maybe cautious, but worth knowing." She stood. "So many of your stories end in violence," she said. "Yeah," he replied, "but the good ones don't." The door chimed again. This time, it was an aid nonverbal species, spider-like limbs, softly tapping the edge of the entryway. "Council requests your presence," the translator chimed. John stood, his knee cracking slightly. That old ligament still barked now and then. "You sure you want to go back in?" the Zarathi asked. "No," he said, smiling faintly. "But that's never stopped us before." He limped just a little as they walked side by side down the corridor, past transparent walls showing the vast sweep of stars outside, a blue dot visible in the distance, barely more than memory. At the chamber entrance, she paused. "There is one thing I still do not understand." "Just one?" he said. She didn't return the joke. "You showed us images of agony, of suffering your kind accepts regularly. You revealed how fragile you are. Yet even so, you insist on reaching outward, joining others. Why?" John didn't answer right away. He stepped into the chamber, voices rising as delegates returned to session. Lights shifted, protocols reactivated. The weight of attention settled on his shoulders again. But he turned back once more. "To stop being alone," he said. Then he walked into the center of the most powerful room in the known galaxy. Not as a warning, not as a threat, but as a man who had survived a world designed to kill him and still chose to build bridges. He took his seat, and the galaxy listened.